Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 1955 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Anna Magnani won for her performance in The Rose Tattoo. But why did she beat fellow nominees Susan Hayward, Katharine Hepburn, Jennifer Jones, and Eleanor Parker? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 28th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 1955. We'll be discussing why Anna Magnani won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today, I've had on multiple episodes of On Second Thought in the past, but now he's making his main show debut, much like his colleague at Next Best Picture, Lauren LaMagna, on the 1951 episode, making the jump up to the main show. Please welcome from Next Best Picture, Dan Bayer.
Hello, Kevin and audience.
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on the main show for once.
Right. Much overdue. We'll see by the end if we'll have you on again. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure you'll be great.
I have always said whenever you will have me, I am happy to be had.
That is true, yes. And I know this is a very busy time, so I appreciate you for fitting in 5 movies from 1955 to watch in the midst of everyone watching all of the fall movies.
Hey, sometimes you just need a little break for just classic cinema.
Yes, some classic actressing.
Some
classic right. Actressing. We'll get into it. Well, before we talk 1955, let's talk Best Actress as a category. My first question for you, Dan, what is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
That is easier than it probably should be. But it is and has always been Vivien Leigh in A Streetcar Named Desire.
Yes. I mean, not a hot take.
Far from it. It's maybe one of the coldest takes I could probably have. But that performance to me is just everything. It is the perfect midpoint between the sort of 1930s, 40s style studio acting and the method acting that was just coming out of the gate in the 50s, and it's stunning. It's a stunning performance that just knocks me on my ass every time. I think it's helped by having an incredibly amazing cast around her, so that they're all working together and bouncing off of each other and just doing so many interesting things individually, and even amongst that she stands out and in a very purposeful way, and the way she gets at the psychology of that character is just superb.
It's everything you say I agree with. No notes. We already talked at length about her performance on the 1951 episode, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. All I could say is ditto.
Yeah.
So, well, my other question for you, because we love our winners, but we also love our losers, as it were. What would you say is your most heartbreaking loss in Best Actress?
Oh, that's hard. A lot of times when I think of like my heartaches with Best Actress, it's not so much who didn't win as who didn't get nominated.
And Lauren LaMagna said the exact same thing.
See, there you go. We're really the same people, just in different bodies. But if I absolutely had to pick one, I Jenna Rollins, A Woman Under the Influence.
Wow.
I
That is,
am the
yeah.
king of the hot takes today, I realize.
Well, I mean, that doesn't come up as often as you might think, so I do appreciate you talking about that performance, which I very much am looking forward to getting to. It's
It's an
a
incredible,
volcanic performance.
yeah, it is an incredible lineup that year,
Yes,
but
that's what makes it tricky,
yeah,
right?
but like,
Yes, it is very that. Excellent. Two very, very good choices. Cannot quibble with those whatsoever. So let's get right to it, talking about what we're here to talk about today. The 28th Academy Awards for Best Actress. The nominees were Susan Hayward for I'll Cry Tomorrow, Katharine Hepburn for Summertime, Jennifer Jones for Love is a Many-Splendored Thing, Anna Magnani for The Rose Tattoo, and Eleanor Parker for Interrupted Melody, with the winner being Anna Magnani. So, before we get into these performances individually, did you have any thoughts or observations at all just from sort of binging these films collectively over the past week or so?
they all had incredibly handsome male co-stars.
There is that. They do have that in common.
which made watching some of these movies a hell of a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the thing that I really was interested by most by these performances was kind of what I was talking about a little bit with Vivien Leigh in Streetcar, is that there's sort of this like mixture of the very old school screen acting that was, sort of made Hollywood what it was, and you can sense the method acting starting to like creep in around the edges. And I feel like this category, it's very much half one and half the other, and I just find that really interesting.
That's definitely something that has been a recurring theme, I think, with the 50s, that it does feel like that transition point in many respects that more or less started with, as you said, Vivien Leigh and Marlon Brando and that whole team. What I really came away with just looking at this lineup and watching them as well is it feels like a modern kind of lineup, just in terms of looking at the kinds of performances these are, because number one, multiple biopics.
Oh, God, yeah.
There's that, right? I mean, you have most of these women were nominees already. I do feel like as of late, we've gotten a lot of like multi nominees who'd already been nominated before getting into Best Actress again. And you have a performance here by, Katharine Hepburn that I do think is a little bit in keeping with a nominee that we just had in Best Actress. Maybe I'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to it. And you have a little bit of controversy here, with Jennifer Jones doing her thing. So
that's a good phrase for it.
Yes, I'm just trying to be diplomatic. Plus, you have our winner here being, an international nominee that we sometimes get in this category. It just feels like a combination that you would very much see these days. So I'm curious what we'll say about these individually, because I don't think this is a particularly phenomenal lineup necessarily. This isn't an all-timer, but once again, there's a lot to get into with pretty much all of them.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get started. All right, going in alphabetical order, we are going to first Susan Hayward for I'll Cry Tomorrow. So this is her fourth Oscar nomination and her fourth loss. So her narrative is just continuing to build. Eventually it will culminate with 1958, I Want to Live, her finally winning. But this is a role that I think is really just sort of combining all the elements of her previous nominations. She's got an alcohol problem, she's dealing with, boy troubles, and also she's playing a real person. And what's funny is that, first of all, this was a very, very highly sought after role. I did find a list of all the names that were in contention for this. We had Jane Russell, Jane Wyman, Janet Leigh, Gene Simmons, Piper Laurie, and Grace Kelly and June Allison.
Piper
Yeah.
Laurie, wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that would have been wild. But yeah, then we had Susan here writing a letter to the head of MGM and was like, listen, I've played an alcoholic before. I've played a real person before. I got Oscar nominations for them. They're my two favorite films. This part belongs to me.
Well, the part kind of does belong to her, honestly.
Yes.
Like,
Right?
I mean, if
um,
any of these performances is, a showcase of sheer personality.
yes, very, very much that. And, she studied Lillian Roth in Vegas. She met her several times, had conversations with her. She she just knew what she wanted, and Lillian said that she wanted her, so the studio obliged, and she got the part, and she got this nomination. And once again, we say good for her. We always love when an actress advocates for herself, especially in the studio system.
Damn right.
Yeah. So I'll Cry Tomorrow. It tells the story of Lillian Roth, who was a real life Broadway star who had to deal with a stage mother growing up. And then, even into her adulthood, she got involved with a series of men who either, met their demise or they weren't good for her. And all the while, she became addicted to drinking to the point that even people around her that worked with her were very concerned. So the story is sort of just about that, and by the end, it's her road to recovery. So let's talk about it. Susan Hayward. I don't know if you have a lot of experience with Susan, but very curious what you think of Susan here in this very dramatic film.
Very dramatic. Um, my previous encounter, singular, with Susan Hayward was her Oscar-winning performance in I Want to
Mm-hmm.
Live, which I thought was very good. But one of the things that I had always heard is that, like, well, of her nominations, it's maybe one of the lesser ones, and she really should have won for I'll Cry Tomorrow or Smash Up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've been this particular film has been on my radar for a long time. Haven't seen it until now. Maybe the best drunk acting I think I've ever seen. I
She specialized in it. Yeah.
She is phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
it is kind of big and broad and blowsy, but there are also little subtle things that she gets at it, like the way that she holds her body, like she is always looking for something to lean against or put her weight on, and the way that she slurs her speech feels less acted and more just alcoholic mumble mouthed.
Mm.
I don't know what other way to put it. There's so much of her drunk addict acting that it never feels like a put on. It feels like we are really watching this woman drunk. And that's really hard to put over. I think it was especially hard, during this period of filmmaking. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
everyone is always, going way over the top or just being very, very subtle about it. And she
Yeah.
walks that line, I think, really, really well. It's also surprisingly funny performance. I
Mm-hmm.
caught myself laughing at it a lot, and not just in a like, oh, the 50s kind of
Right.
way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she is genuinely funny, gets a lot of laughs. Um, and even if I think the film as a whole kind of drags on, especially towards the end, it just kind of like, oh, can we get there already? Like we've been through this. We know yes, we know. Um, Kind of becomes aimless in the third act a little, and then moves. Once she goes to AA, it just moves very, very slowly towards the end. It kind of crawls there. And I was a little disappointed because it had a lot of energy and personality before that. But despite that, I was always kind of entranced by her performance. I couldn't stop watching her. Didn't want to take my eyes off her whenever she was on screen because she was always doing something interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'll say what I said in the past with Susan is what I love about her is that she always goes for it.
Always. Oh my
She
God.
always had this kind of go for broke approach to her acting
Mhm.
style that doesn't always work, but when she's in the right part like this that allows her to really dig into the material, she's very watchable, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Oh, and she
Eh,
did her own singing too. Like, I
She
mean,
did her own singing.
you
Yeah.
know?
No lip syncing here, unlike another performance we'll talk about
Oh,
maybe.
we'll get there.
Um, yes, but yeah, I think it is like a blending of everything we've seen from her thus far. We
Mhm.
have the alcoholism and the marital issues, playing a real person. It's really, now having seen it, because this was my first time watching it as well. It's probably the performance that I would point to if you were to ask me to sum up what Susan Hayward was all about. It's this.
Yeah.
It's loud, it's melodramatic at times, it's
Mhm.
very expressive. It can verge into some elements of campiness, I think,
Mhm.
but I think she does find kind of something raw here, and you can tell that she connected with this character and was given pretty much free reign to just craft this performance on her own, for better or for worse. But I do really think that there's something kind of fragile also about this performance that is also reflecting what Susan was actually going through at the time. She was actually getting divorced.
Mm.
She was in a custody battle for her kids. And apparently, there was a night that she overdosed on sleeping pills and she barely survived.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very, very, very turbulent time for her. And I think there's kind of a level of despair here that's sort of hanging over a lot of scenes that I don't want to like speak for her in any way, but I imagine some of that may have been able to channel that into just, yeah, bringing her own demons into this character,
I am
perhaps.
I'm thinking of two scenes in particular,
Yeah.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right about that sort of fragility that she brings to it. The moment when she's in the hotel room and is looking over outside the window and sort of thinking about jumping is
Yeah.
particularly strong. And
Yeah.
and well filmed too. Like, it's not overly obvious. It doesn't go for making it a big moment. It just sort of lets you
That's true.
know, like, it doesn't overdo it. And I thought that was really well done. And the other scene that I was thinking of when you said that is the scene with her second husband, I think, that we see in the movie.
There's a lot of different men to
Yeah,
keep
there's
up
a
with
lot of
here, but
men.
yeah. Yeah.
But the scene on the train
Uh huh.
when he orders a bottle of alcohol, and they're both, sort of trying to kick the kick
Right. Because
kick the
he's also
habit and get,
alcoholic. Yeah.
you know stay on the wagon. And she's like, no, I how dare you, and I need it, you'll give me some. He's like, no, this is for me. It's a very interesting scene as written, and watching the way that she plays it and going through all these different levels of desperation and bargaining. It's really like she kind of goes through all the 7 stages of grief,
Mm-hmm.
in subtle ways during that one scene. And it does feel like something that you would sort of bring your own stuff to.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, I don't know about her early childhood or like how she got into the business that much necessarily, but I do wonder also about your thoughts on how she was in the first act, when she's first getting into the business. And I mean, there's just a little bit at the beginning where it's a younger actress playing her. But then eventually it goes to her. And I think there's something really interesting in her performance where I don't want to say she feels older or looks older, but it's like she looks older than she's acting necessarily.
Yeah.
Like she's sort of acting out in these ways that this isn't like the behavior of someone you would expect from
Hmm.
someone of her age. I don't know exactly what age she is, but I just felt like there's a bit of like that arrested development feeling of this is someone who never got the opportunity to do things on her own. She was always controlled by her stage mother, played by Jo Van Fleet, I think is also really good here.
Mhm.
And she felt to me like she's a little too immature for her age in the opening act.
Yeah, I really like that, and I think that kind of it carries through a little throughout the movie too, but it is
Yeah.
particularly noticeable in the first act. I also thought Jo Van Fleet was great. I especially love the moment when she goes to pick her up at the AA and they won't let her in because she's going through like the worst of it at that moment. I thought that
Yeah.
it was just chef's kiss perfect in that moment. But to get back to Susan and what you were saying, yeah, there is something you can sort of see her sort of slip back into that mindset of that you have when you're a child performer is like get out there and we're gonna put on a show and we're gonna get everybody to love us.
Mm-hmm.
And she has that need for the audience and the energy that they're giving to her that I thought was so palpable whenever she was
Yeah.
performing. And yeah, especially in the scenes with her mother, I think in that first half, you see like, yes, she is technically an adult, but
Yeah. I mean, just also to speak to her performing those performance scenes, I do think that she is a pretty good singer.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was literally like,
she has a lot of character in her voice.
yes. Of course, like me being me, I was like, did Lillian Roth actually sound like that? But like, it kind of doesn't matter. Um,
Right.
like the fact that she was able to sing at all using her own voice is, something that not a lot of actresses would necessarily do, and she has the voice to be believable as someone who was coming up in vaudeville and made a name for themselves on Broadway at that time.
Yeah, it's very big and kind of throaty and brassy, and
Yeah,
she's very good in that element.
yeah.
And then even like I noticed even in the first after the first performance where she's full of confidence and just really wanting your attention, by the end she goes off stage and she's with her mother and she instantly becomes insecure about like whether or not it was good.
Oh yeah, and then the mother was like, "Yeah, you're right. No, it wasn't very good at all." And the director was like, "Great, we got what we need." And then all of a
Right.
sudden, like the mother's attitude changes, and she's like, "But you just said that it wasn't good at all. What do you mean?"
Mhm.
And there's an element there that is like you were saying, it is kind of childlike, and that she is not fully in control of even her own opinions and emotions at
Right.
times.
Yeah, which I think is sadly kind of a tale as old as time when it comes to show business.
Yeah, yeah,
You
absolutely,
know.
especially around this period of time.
Oh, well, yes, definitely this time, for sure. This is like 40s era, 30s when this is happening.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's pretty much the worst of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I do agree with a lot of what you're saying about the sort of the way that the film is staged. I do think that there can be moments where even though it does drag a little bit that there are other parts where it feels rushed.
Mhm.
Like there are moments where it's just like she's gotten married to this guy kind of on a whim, like a soldier, and then it's a horrible time for both of them. It was a
Mhm.
huge mistake. And then they just like have an argument, and then suddenly it's 2 years later.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, I'm divorced now. Isn't this great? It's just it feels like some transition material is a little bit missing overall, but it
Yeah.
reminds me of a similar thing in Blossoms in the Dust with Greer Garson, where it's like, oh, suddenly now I have an orphanage, and it's like, okay, what? Sure, I have to adjust to this new reality for her. Um,
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting because during that period of the movie, there's also there's a really well done montage of them like going out, and that tracks the sort of
yeah,
rise and fall of their relationship. And then once that's done, it's like, okay, we're just gonna jump ahead 2 years. Like,
Yeah.
give me something.
It's a little bit of a biopic syndrome that I think
Yes.
still is plaguing
Yeah.
biopics
It
to this day.
it is really interesting how like this movie was like it's dealing with like all these tropes that by now are just so ingrained of
Right.
biopics, and in particular biopics of people who are in the entertainment business, but
Mm-hmm.
also addiction and specifically alcoholism narratives. It was a like just like had a checkbox and it was just going all the way through. But that's because like Lillian Roth's book, I'll Cry Tomorrow, was like one of the first real big celebrity memoirs that dealt with this sort of issue.
Exactly.
She's shined a real light on the plight of the alcoholic, and it makes sense that this sort of like set that template.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of an undeniable story that she has. Like, it's
Hmm.
really very juicy, very fascinating.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's hard to sort of look at it with 2022 lenses and be like, well, this is a little bit standard, when in reality, this more or less was part of setting the template for
Yeah.
decades to come of these types of movies.
The one thing that would have been different, and I swear, if this was made like today, the whole thing would have been centered around her appearance on This Is Your Life. And that would have been the framing device. Like,
Yep,
tell me it
you're
wouldn't have
so right.
been. It would have used that as a framing device. And part of me thinks that that might actually have been a slightly better movie than this,
Yeah, that
because
would have been cool.
it would have
Yeah,
allowed for there to be those gaps, you know?
that's a really good point,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, because otherwise it's just chronological. And
Yeah.
then by the end, it's like, okay, now you're going to be on This Is Your Life, and then we don't actually see
And
anything.
then that's the
But
like culminating moment. Just like
right,
she's back, living through all the
yes,
horrible things you just saw in front of a nationwide audience. What
yes,
a wonderful woman.
triumphant walking to
Yeah.
the stage. Yes, yeah. But I do want to also just touch on the stuff in the third act, which I think is really harrowing stuff. Um,
Really?
yeah, especially again for the time
Oh
period,
my God.
where she's obviously been in this. You mentioned the moment on the train. She's in that relationship with, I think his name is Tony,
Mm,
um, and she says she's gonna give up drinking for him, and then she starts to have the withdrawals and she's shaking, which I
mm-hmm.
found to be like pretty convincing, honestly.
Yeah.
Like that could have been very over the top and a little bit silly, but she really makes it work. Like it's scary realistic what her physical acting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's incredible. She nails it.
yeah,
And there's that period where she goes on a bender of, and this is part of the
right,
thing, is like we don't really know how long, because the movie plays so fast and loose with its transition material,
right.
but she looks um believably dirty,
Mm,
in that
yeah,
like it's very clearly like de-glamming, but it's not, she still looks like she has, the sort of stature and presence of someone who was slash is a star, but
right.
someone who has probably not seen a shower in a good long while.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and she's like selling one of her coats just to get more
Yeah,
alcohol,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
she's really sort of sinking to these new lows, which I think another scene for that is when she's in the bar room and
Yeah.
she's just completely plastered, you
Oh
know,
God, it's so
and
good.
she's like reciting what she would say when she was 8 years old, like performing
Yes.
these imitations and dramatic parts, and
Hmm.
it's like kind of scary, honestly, to see that.
Yeah, and she yells like I don't. She must have watched the little girl who played her, because she sounds just like her when she
Yeah.
starts to do it. And then when she finds AA,
Hmm.
God, that scene where she breaks down in front of Eddie Albert and the other the ladies who are there. Oh my God, it's breathtaking.
I know.
I really don't have another word for it. She gets at it so honestly, and the word you use, it's harrowing
Hmm.
to watch her
Yeah.
come to that realization and come to grips with that. And the first scene at her when she goes to her first actual AA meeting, and
Yeah.
she immediately puts her hands up for, it's the first time here, and then there's that little hesitation after they say, and who here is an alcoholic. Like, she's still fighting it, and she still doesn't want to believe, and she can, stop drinking what she wants, but she also knows why she's there, and that there's a reason for it, and that reason is boop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very well observed, I think.
Yeah.
As a film of what someone who has been through that process would be feeling.
Absolutely.
Even when she's like listening to other people's stories in AA and she's really kind of suppressing the tears is actually a really good moment of like subtlety, which we don't always have here, but it's really just saying a lot just by saying nothing at all. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty well-rounded performance on the whole, and definitely my favorite of the 4 that I've watched so far of hers. And in a way, like, I know that Anna Magnani has a certain X factor to her that we'll talk about, but in a way I am actually a little bit surprised that she didn't win for this, because it's like really does check every box.
Every single box.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe people were almost uncomfortable with it.
Maybe. I mean, maybe these topics were still like really difficult to talk about, and maybe some of them had worked with Lillian Roth and were like, that woman was a bitch.
Well, there is that. Yeah, sadly a possibility. But do you have anything else on our friend Susan here before we move on to Katharine?
Can we just get to Katharine?
Okay, like, let's get to Katharine.
Nothing against Susan or her performance in this movie, but like, Summertime is very special to me.
Yes. All right. Let's move to our friend Katharine Hepburn for Summertime. So here we come to her 6th Oscar nomination here, and really another one that I think is defining a new era for Katharine Hepburn, a more mature Katharine Hepburn, but definitely one that I think is getting better with age. She had done The African Queen in 1951, which definitely cast her in a bit of a new light. She did Pat and Mike the year after, and then it's a 3-year break until Summertime, which she apparently jumped at the chance to, not only work with David Lean here, but to film on location in Italy.
And who wouldn't?
I mean, really. She plays Jane Hudson, not to be confused with Baby Jane Hudson, she's an unmarried woman who she refers to herself as a fancy secretary from Ohio. And she takes a summer vacation to Italy in the hope of just having a great experience and really sort of make a certain dream come true for herself that hasn't really been realized before. So she goes there and she ends up meeting this guy, Renato, who owns an antique shop, and the two of them have an affair, only it comes out later that he's married with kids. So that complicates things. Otherwise, a lot of the film is her just experiencing this beautiful location on her own, really just taking things in and just sort of trying to find satisfaction in a way. So, Dan, let's talk Katharine Hepburn. Obviously, she's this towering figure in film history. I'm sure you have a take on Katharine Hepburn. So, would love to know your feelings on her and this performance in particular.
She is one of my favorite actresses that has ever lived. And this is one of my favorite performances of hers. It's also one of my favorite movies, but this is also my favorite genre. I am a hopeless romantic, and movies about, people, especially people who may be a little bit older in life, but they meet and they ignite a flame, and it just burns so bright that it cannot last. Like this, another David Lean movie, Brief Encounter,
yeah,
Casablanca, Before Sunrise, In the Mood for Love. They're
speaking my language.
These are my crack. I love
yes.
them.
Same.
And look, it's hard not to fall head over sensible heels for Rossano Brazzi.
Mm-hmm.
So don't blame Jane Hudson at all for that. But the thing that I really love about this movie is that this is not the kind of part that you would associate with Katharine Hepburn
Yeah.
ever. She is like the independent woman of cinema. You know, we think of
Mm-hmm.
Tracy Lord from the Philadelphia Story, or we think of Amanda Bonner from Adam's Rib, or Susan from Bringing Up Babies, Joe from Little Women,
Yeah.
like people who are independent and strong and know what they want and go for it. And Jane Hudson is not any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
She is very meek and shy almost. And, we don't think of Katharine Hepburn as the type of person or playing the type of people who has never taken a vacation abroad or,
Yeah.
have trouble calling a waiter in a cafe. Um, but she does it, and she is still believable. And I think that comes down to the way that she is able to put across that, like, Jane doesn't really like herself. She doesn't
Mm.
like that this is the way she is, and she maybe wants to change it, but she's not sure how. And then once she starts going out with Renato, it starts pouring out of her in the most beautiful way. And there's this, she almost feels like a little girl at some points. She kind of feels like a
Mm.
teenager who can't believe that such a handsome man is interested in her, and like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just there's a moment when she works up the courage to sort of like invite herself to go with two of the people who are staying at her the little hostel or
Mm-hmm.
pensione that she's staying in Venice, and the wife is like, oh yeah, come, and the husband is like, well, we're kind of meeting people, and it's another couple. And as soon as she hears that it's another couple, she's like, oh, okay, well then go. And
Yeah.
the wife is sort of like admonishes her husband, and so he like calls out to her like, no, please come, but she doesn't. And
Right.
when it cuts back to her, just the look on her face, and later she's kind of like just sitting in a cafe, and she just looks so lonely and sad. And then she'll hear music playing, or she'll hear the bells, or she'll see some children playing or something, and it will just, her face just lights up. And she realizes, like, God, I hate that I'm alone, but how wonderful to be alone and to be free to go wherever this world may take me. And it's so beautiful, and it is something that I very much relate to.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, maybe it's my own little personal biases kicking in for how much I love this performance, but I think that the way Katharine Hepburn plays so strongly and so well against type in this movie, it's one of her greatest performances.
Yes. I continue to love this era of Katharine Hepburn's career. I think she's really just proving that, even though she had a very distinct personality and a way of speaking that you'd think wouldn't translate to certain genres or certain characters,
Mm-hmm.
she is still able to adapt to the kind of film that she's in. She understood the assignment.
Yes.
Every time.
Always.
Not every time, but
Always.
most times.
Most
yes.
time.
I'm removing Dragon Seed from the equation.
Well, that
but
was I mean, she
Anyway,
understood the assignment, but the assignment was. Ugh.
yeah, the assignment was bad. But, she's great as the ingenue in those early performances that we've talked about. She's very fun as kind of an action hero in The African Queen. And then here, it's this sort of straight melodrama, and she's at an age now where she's more mature. There aren't a lot of love stories with characters of her age. She's in her late 40s at this time, and as we know, Hollywood can be quite cruel to women in the industry. But yeah, this is such a fascinating performance from her, where it does feel actually like she is blending some of that classic leading lady romantic ingenue aspects of her earlier career, but then also the maturity and the life experience that is necessary for bringing this character to life. She's a middle-aged woman, she's single. The assumption is that she's never been married. She doesn't have kids. She hasn't necessarily even had an adventurous kind of life up to this point. And this character in this film, it is very much, I think, about loneliness and the complexity of that, where she has this independent type of spirit, which is Katharine Hepburn to a T. So that's not exactly like a stretch, that aspect of it. But there are these moments that I think you even mentioned too, of the quiet, that we get, where it's like the absence of other people starts to weigh on her. And then in other moments, seeing all the couples around her can make her feel quite isolated too, which is a very, very real thing. You can be surrounded by people in certain situations and feel more lonely and more self-conscious than if you're actually alone, and I think she definitely captures that feeling, and I've absolutely been there. And it's a credit to her and David Lean, and just for them to be able to translate that without also going in the direction of just sort of turning this into like a pity party. You don't really feel sorry for her in like a cheap way.
Yes,
you feel for her.
Yeah, it's very much a mature performance in a lot of ways, and I think that's one of them. Like, she never goes for the easiest beats or acting choices. There's the scene where she tells Renato that she is leaving later that day, and she begins to cry. I swear to God, every time, we sometimes play that game, the fantasy game of like, who else would have been cast in this part? Who else would you see in this role? Blah, blah, blah. And I swear to God, any other actress I can think of from this period in that part, they would have turned towards the camera and we can see the tears and how they're fighting them. Not Katharine Hepburn. She turns away from the camera, and I just find that such a fascinating choice. That she does not want the camera to see her this way. She does not want to be seen this weak, this sad, and it's such an atypical choice for actresses at that time to take what's potentially a big dramatic moment and say, no, you don't get to see it. And
yeah, that's a good point.
It's so fascinating to me because it speaks to, I think, there's a way to read it as like, well, that's Katharine Hepburn taking control of her persona and not wanting to be seen a certain way on screen. But then at the same time, it's also a very striking character choice that she also doesn't want to be seen this way.
Yeah.
And
she doesn't want him to see her that way.
Yeah. It is
her mind.
Her mind. What a brilliant woman. We are truly all better for having had her alive in this world. I bow at her altar. And this is where I should probably talk about the last scene in this movie.
Oh boy.
Because that last shot of her when the train has left and he's on the platform. Like, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it. Like, he lifts up the flower and she sees it and she waves to him like, I want it framed. I want that shot as a GIF framed on my walls. The most beautiful freaking thing.
Yes.
I
It's gorgeous.
ah
Mm-hmm.
ah I the whole movie, like any movie like this, it sort of hinges on that scene in order to work. It hinges on that last scene where they either get together or they don't. And oh my God, it aces it in every way. And it all falls on her. It is all on her in that moment. And like, we'll get to what happens when the actress in this kind of role is not strong enough
Sure.
to portray that. But like,
Yes.
Katharine Hepburn is one of the greatest to ever do it, and she this just cascade of emotions on her face in the course of like 5 seconds or something like that. I
Yeah.
it's
I
punch in the gut. Punch in the gut.
It is. It's a deeply emotional film, and I think it's even more emotional as you were sort of talking about in the fact that she is so trying to restrain so much. That just makes it all the more heartbreaking. It feels good in a place like this, you could say.
Amen.
I would love to see this on the big screen, by the way, just as an
God.
aside.
Oh my God, yes.
Somebody needs to restore this, and obviously it is restored through the Criterion, but
Yes.
this needs to be on the big screen.
Please,
anyway.
somebody, anybody.
Yes. But I'm curious what your thoughts are just on their relationship, because I think for me it's the kind of thing where you could definitely sense the very odd chemistry that they share together, where you're not maybe used to seeing characters like this sort of falling in love, but it just feels weirdly natural and they sort of fall into place. But at the same time, it feels like something that's probably not going to last. And I think they both sort of toe that line pretty well overall.
Oh yeah, totally agree with everything you just said.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she says in the start of the film, she has this, pamphlet of Venice, the city of romance or city of love or something. Right. And she, tells this little story about someone that she met who was just looking for something, some kind of adventure or, ephemeral romance. And it's the kind of thing where that she's going to be leaving in a few days. So it doesn't really matter that he's married or whatever the situation may be, because she's going to leave anyway. But they play it so well. And I mean, like, the thing that always gets me about this movie is they play a lot with what does he see in her.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, no offense, but, like, it's obvious what she sees in him. Right. Okay? Like,
he's a beautiful Italian
man. Is so handsome and suave as fuck.
And he owns an antique shop.
I mean, he has an appreciation of the finer things in life, clearly. Appreciation for beauty, and just, like, it's impossible not to fall in love with him. But I particularly love the way that the movie itself, but particularly Hepburn and Razzi play with this idea of what does he see in her? Why is he so beguiled by this woman? Why is he willing to, try to escape his marriage with her? And I love that they sort of hint at answers why. I think that, there's something about, I mean, Jane Hudson is Jane Hudson, but she's also played by Katharine Hepburn, and she can't help it. She has a presence about her. She has an aura. She has an energy. And there is something so that you can tell that he is intrigued why this woman is the way she is.
Yes.
And he's maybe not sure of his own feelings about it, but he knows that he finds her intriguing, and wants to spend more time with her, and as he does and starts to get to know her, he sort of realizes too late almost that he's at a point of no return.
Yeah, it's true. And who among us wouldn't be in the presence of
Right?
Katharine? But
Yeah.
she just has that magnetic presence to begin with, so
Mhm.
it's like half the work is done just by being Katharine Hepburn. But I also really enjoy the scene of her knowing that a date is coming, so she
Oh,
has her day of primping, she
yeah.
gets her mani-pedi, she gets the high heels, you know. But then she finds out he has a wife and kids. And I think it's that sense you have sometimes where you're used to things not really going your way,
Yeah.
and then there's a little bit of hope for something, but then it just comes crashing down and it somehow feels worse than before.
Yep.
That's kind of how she is feeling in that moment, and she expresses that very, very well, and just her pride,
Yeah.
and her very conflicting feelings about this whole arrangement. But he's kind of able to convince her to, let's just go out dancing and sort of enjoy some fine dining, and we'll get you a gardenia and everything will be good, and there's fireworks and it's all okay.
And that's just
But
also the perfect fucking date. Like,
yeah, it is. It's like the ideal. It's like this film set the ideal date for everyone that we all now have to live up to.
It's true. It's true.
Which, by the way, the whole fireworks thing as they're about to go to bed, very subtle, David Lean. We get it. It's the 50s, I know, but and she leaves out her high heel on the
Oh my God,
balcony.
yes. I love it so much.
Sometimes the production code can lead to some interesting creative choices. I'll just say that.
Yep. Perfect way of saying it.
Yes, so there's that. But I mean, just in general, I do think the film, it's just kind of lovely to see her having this romance, and there's no sort of judgment put on her at all. It's not like leering awkwardly. It's just like this pure melodrama, and very much the vibe of that brief encounter. By the end, they're just sort of walking around, going to the island, and she's like waving goodbye on the gondola, and it's just this really nice, just like I don't want to say vibes type of movie, but like I love those moments of just no plot, just like we're just going to enjoy the environment that we're in while we still can, in her case. It's such a warm feeling by the end, even though it does make me very emotional. It just leaves me in a very good emotional place, and that's a huge credit to her. She completely carries this film. So once again, Katharine Hepburn, we salute you.
Forever and always.
And just, yeah, like you were saying, just the final scene in the train and her waving goodbye is such a beautifully photographed image.
The first time that I saw this movie, I remember like liking it, thinking it was good, mostly just like spent most of the time just like swooning over Rossano Brazzi. And
well, yeah.
I mean, because why would you not? And
Sure.
Then it got to the end, that moment, and I was like, this is one of my favorite movies of all time now.
Don't you love when that happens? You're watching a movie and you're like, oh no, this is actually going to be one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah. Like that movie just, it ends so perfectly and so beautifully, and just completely elevated it, took it to another level. I love that.
Mm-hmm. And I get the sense that this is something I also said with the African Queen too, where if there's almost any other actress in this role, I sort of struggle to even see this kind of performance being nominated.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there's just something very unique and obviously very impressive about her screen presence and how she's able to adapt to these different stories to do exactly what needs to be done and surprise you with certain choices, as you mentioned, her turning away. It's a testament to her presence more than anything, because it's another thing that, just to go on another tangent, that we've talked about on this show, where sometimes certain performances and actors are nominated for the characters that they are playing more so than what they themselves are bringing to it necessarily, to put it nicely.
Yeah.
And in her case, I think she's very often just elevating the material that she's given and really proving that she deserves these nominations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I'm done. I just think that it's a testament to why great acting should be acknowledged, not just, that it's such a brilliantly written character. She always is elevating the material. So
Literally always.
yeah. Well, on that note,
talking about elevating the material.
Yes. Let's move on to our next nominee. We have Jennifer Jones for Love is a Many-Splendored Thing. Is it? Let's find out.
Oh, God.
So, as we like to say on this show, a lot to unpack here. So, this is Jennifer Jones' fifth and final Oscar nomination. All of her nominations were extremely different, I'll say that.
Yes.
But this is not the first time that she is playing someone of another race.
So that's understand.
Something. Yeah. Famously, she played a half Native American woman in Duel in the Sun.
Why, Hollywood? Why?
This time, she's playing a Eurasian woman.
And I get that, like, to the audience of the 1950s, this was probably a very new, if you'll pardon the word, foreign concept. But, like, I have never heard the word Eurasian spoken so many times in such close succession. Oh my God.
It's a trip. Yeah. And, this came at a time when Jennifer Jones' reputation was not great. Her husband, David O. Selznick, his reputation wasn't great. And, a lot of what she had done in the previous few years just wasn't really working, wasn't a hit. So then here comes this novel. It's called A Many-Splendored Thing, which was written by Han Soo-yin. And it was apparently loosely based on her life. It goes to the censor board and they say it's not fit for a film because of, its sexual nature and because of good old miscegenation.
Yep.
So that's why we don't have an actual Eurasian woman cast in this role, because of studio racism.
Jesus.
The film is about Han Soo-yin, played by Jennifer, a Eurasian doctor working in Hong Kong, and it's the late 40s. She's a widow and she doesn't have time for love, but then she meets this American correspondent played by William Holden. His name is Mark, and the two of them fall in love despite, her having some misgivings about falling in love again. But there's this issue of him already being married. Once again, that's coming up. A common theme of these nominees, I guess. He's already married, but they're separated. And there's also the fact that they live two very different lives. And, he's going off as a correspondent to places like Korea, but they try to make it work. So, yes, let's talk about it. Dan, thoughts on Jennifer Jones and her performance here?
I'm not the biggest fan of Jennifer Jones to begin with, but in this movie, she is remarkably stiff, even for her. And
even for her.
I don't know if that's because she was trying to look/act more quote unquote Asian.
Yeah.
But it just and I also know that her and William Holden apparently did not get along very well.
No, they did not.
The making of this movie. But even still, while that animosity does not come through, I really did spend a lot of this movie going I get why she's falling for you, Mark, but She is just so flat and uninteresting, or she is revealed to be so flat and uninteresting of a person. I
Yeah.
think the like first act of this movie, when they're setting everything up, I thought it was actually really engaging and really good, and I kind of liked that she had a little bit of spunk to her.
Hmm.
I think she kind of has some of these really nice, comebacks and retorts to uh, a lot of people and things that are said to her. But as it goes on, she just becomes flatter and drippier and less interesting until like the very end of the
Yeah.
movie. Like I spent probably the whole back half of this movie glad that I was watching it at home so that I could do other things while I was watching it. Uh,
Classic.
and
Laundry folding.
yep,
And
and
whatnot.
just like checking Twitter on my phone.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
the last 5 minutes are, I think, the best 5 minutes of the whole movie. And
Mm.
while I don't think that anything that comes before remotely earns that ending, I think that it does about the best job that it could with that material to end it on a note that feels really tragic, romantic, and epic. But she's so stiff.
Hmm.
She's so stiff and boring and uninteresting, and I spent the whole movie clinging to William Holden's shirtless torso like it was a life vest.
And like she is doing in the
Like
poster.
she's doing in the poster.
That's literally you. Yes.
It's literally me, because like you are the only good thing about this movie.
I have to just be honest with everyone. I really dreaded this. I had actually seen it before
Oh no.
because this is a Best Picture nominee also.
Which
Not
like
sure why, but yeah.
why of like the movies in this category, this was the one that got the Best Picture nomination? It's
Yep.
like one of
Yep.
those things where like I guess you just had to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Very much
but
that.
as I've
Yeah.
learned sometimes, like even when you're there, it doesn't quite make a lot of sense sometimes. So who knows?
Yeah, so when I watched it the first time, I remember just finding it really dull at best and
Ugh.
just kind of offensive at worst,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh my god.
I was curious though to see if any of my feelings would actually change, having now gone through Jennifer Jones, all of her nominations chronologically now, and nope. I still
Nope.
find this to be mostly just a flat line of a movie.
Yeah.
I really don't understand how this inspired such a passion because I know it was a box office hit.
That they made a TV show adaptation
They
of it
did.
/ sequel or whatever, and just like, why were people so obsessed with this?
They did. And just as an aside, while we're talking about that, they actually cast a Eurasian actress for that and then wrote her out of her own damn show.
I can't.
So, yeah. I mean, the poster, we mentioned it, it's quite racy, you know, so maybe that was really drawn people in.
Yeah. But the movie itself.
Yeah. I get very little out of this film. I don't think she has good chemistry at all with William Holden, who I think had been known to have pretty good chemistry with some other, leading lady stars of his day. So that's saying something. I was also reading a lot into the fact that they didn't really like each other behind the scenes. And apparently there was a moment where she was really having problems with him. Not entirely sure what they were, but he actually gave her a bouquet of roses to sort of make the peace, and she threw them in his face. Threw them in his face. Yeah. So there you have it. And when I look at this film, though, I think to myself, like, yeah, that seems about right, because there's no passion at all between these characters, even though that's what the crux of the story is. You're supposed to believe in
Yeah.
this love affair and see how he's able to sort of change her feelings on finding love again, but it's not really there at
You're
all. And I
supposed to
also don't,
believe that they are going to rewrite the stars.
well, I mean,
Reference. And just
did
like
not expect a Greatest Showman reference on this episode, but here we are.
But like, you have to believe that this is a romance that would, like, break all these norms, and it's so strong they're
Yeah.
gonna do all these things, and just like don't get that at all.
Yeah. I think the level of interest you might have in this story is just what's on paper, because it sounds like a juicy sort of plot, right? But the way that it's executed, it's almost like clinical.
Yes.
I mean, like, the costumes are very strong, the score I think can be memorable, but there's very little momentum in a way, and just the character arc of Han, I think I would say, is pretty flat overall, and I don't know, the whole thing kind of just reeks of studio interference, to be honest, and just like doing everything they can to be accepted by the production code, and then in the process of that, they just completely neutered everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of how this feels.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that was the case.
Yeah. And I don't think that, obviously, as much as we can set aside the racism of this, of her playing this role, that's obviously a huge problem in and of itself. But
I'm not sure the movie itself would have been much better with anyone else in that part.
Yeah, I don't know. True. But yeah, the character, I think, she's like this very composed doctor, and she's always clarifying that she's Eurasian whenever, like, there's a clueless white person who says that she's Asian. She's like, actually, you're Asian.
Like, we love a trendsetter.
Yes. Yes.
We love just slightly correcting people on how to
well,
address
actually,
her.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. So there's that, but we learned that, she became a doctor to help her people, and that's it. I mean, I feel like I don't learn a lot from her through her performance or through the way that the character is written.
No.
And so I'm just left being like, where I can't grab onto anything here.
Yeah, and there's like that little interlude, I guess, where she goes to visit her family in China, and
yep.
It's her sister, right, who is in love with a foreigner, and like the family won't give her permission to marry, but she does. She gives her permission, and damn the family, and it. But that doesn't really go anywhere, and it's never picked back up again, and
no, I know.
Doesn't really. In the end, I'm just like, what was the point of this? And the point was to get him in front of the family, and. Right. But still, like, it just, like, all the things that could potentially be interesting about it go nowhere. I really loved, oh God, her friend who is trying to convince her to pass as white.
Yes, yes.
God, and I forget which one who played her, but I thought, like, she was a really interesting character, and the actress gives such personality. I'm like, I want to know more about her. I want to know more about, the friends that she stays with for a while, and the one woman who, because there's a theme in these movies where, like, he's married, but they're, like, they hate each other and they're living apart. And I did love the one woman who, like, oh no, I know his wife. She'll never let him go. She doesn't want him, but she won't let anyone else have him. I'm like, I want to know more about you. I want to spend more time with you. I think you're fun. But, like, we get nothing with these people. They exist solely to push forward the love story, and it keeps pushing the interracial, tradition breaking aspect of this romance, and just doesn't really do much with it other than you have, like, a lot of people saying no.
Right.
But they do it anyway.
And it's sort of under the guise of them saying that actually it's because he's already married.
Yeah, which was interesting. I love that they don't have a problem with the fact that, she's Eurasian and he's white. I guess because they partially just don't see her as Eurasian.
I guess. Sure, yeah.
But no, the issue is that he's married and not divorced yet.
Right.
How scandalous. But if they all know him so well, they should know that that's not a marriage that is currently alive, I guess.
Right. I do find it funny, the one older woman, Adeline.
Yes.
And she's
hilarious.
like, well, I'm not racist, but there are certain customs,
It's like, bitch, please.
Yeah.
Also, I love that she, in the beginning of the movie, she's like, oh, yes, my foot or my ankle or whatever. You can't possibly, dismiss me from the hospital. My house is being painted. I can't go back there.
What a strange movie. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably speaks to the lack of performance here from Jennifer Jones, that we're sort of looking at all these other things around her.
Yeah.
More so than what she's giving, because it's one of these things where, it can be fun to just sort of tear apart a bad performance, or it can be fun to indulge in talking about a really good performance. But this is something in the middle where I just don't feel any feeling towards this person. I feel like I should have a lot more sympathy over what she goes through, especially by the end. And even at the end, where you said that great ending scene, it's yeah, that's really quite effective and would have been even better in a better film that actually, as you said, really earned that. Because otherwise, I feel yes, that's well done, and I like all their little excursions to that beautiful hillside that they go on, their special little place. I think those are pretty well captured, and I don't think they have the best chemistry, but you can sort of get swept up in the sort of romance of that too. But yeah, otherwise I just don't really care at the end of the day, and I feel like I should. So that's literally all I have. Sorry, Miss Jones.
So sorry.
Yeah. And I guess if you want to talk at all about that ending scene, because to end on somewhat of a positive note for her,
it's her best moment in the film. It's the best directed moment in the film. The score finally takes really center stage. I love that shot of the tree on the hill. It's good stuff, and it's one of those things where it's a perfect ending to a movie that does not exist.
Well, there you go. Yes.
In theory, this is a great ending, but the rest of the movie leading up to that is so bad that it doesn't earn it at all.
Right. And I had mentioned to you in the DMs that this reminded me of Love Story, which I think has a very similar issue, personally speaking. I know certain people love that movie, so I don't want to besmirch the film too much, but I think chemistry-wise, that's not always great. Acting-wise, it's a little iffy. And then there's also, the beautiful music, the score, the beautiful costumes, and the ending, which is a tearjerker, and that sort of just makes you forget everything else. And I feel like that's maybe how people walked out of this movie. Wow, what a beautiful, crushing ending. Such a tearjerker. I want to go back and just experience it again and again. Because apparently they did.
Apparently.
I don't know if I got a question about this later on about Jennifer Jones, so I don't want to say where this would rank in her nominations, but not very high. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
I'm ready to move on. Are you?
I am very ready to move on.
All right. Let's get to our final losing nominee here. We've got Eleanor Parker for Interrupted Melody. So, just like we just talked about the last nomination for Jennifer Jones, this is our last Eleanor Parker. We talked about back-to-back at the beginning of this season with Caged and then Detective Story. This is her third nomination in 6 years. So, this was really the moment for Eleanor Parker. And I will never forgive the Academy for not nominating her for The Sound of Music,
Oh God.
but that's another story. Yes, here we have our other performance here of a real life singer, Marjorie Lawrence, who was an opera star, and her career was on the rise, and then she got polio, which definitely derailed things for a little bit until she actually managed to come back with a bang. And this is actually another example of an actress really fighting to be cast. It was actually originally conceived as a film for Lana Turner, but apparently she was considered not enough of a dramatic actress to pull it off. And the studio wasn't entirely convinced that Eleanor had the right sort of, I guess, sort of stage presence for the role, considering she was like thought to be more of a grounded type of actress. But she decided to pull off some diva behavior and just convince the studio that she was right for it. And go ahead.
No, I love that story that apparently they were like, she doesn't have the right presence, she's not enough of a diva persona, and she decided, she walked right into the director's office and was like engaged in diva behavior. Like, this part is mine, this is how I'm going to play it, and you will cast me. I'm like, we applaud.
And we say good for her once again. Yeah. And yeah, she really did her homework. She took voice lessons and she studied arias, even though she was going to be dubbed. But she really wanted to just fully commit herself to having the presence of someone who trained in singing all their life. So yeah, let's talk about it. She's playing Marjorie Lawrence, and she grew up in Australia. Not that there's any real accent work here, but
oh my God.
She wins a contest to go to Paris and study opera, where she became somewhat well known, and then she marries this American doctor played by Glenn Ford, and they have some marital issues. But then those are pretty much put aside when she has her battles with polio, and she has to regain her confidence to get back up and perform again. So that's essentially what the story is. Thoughts on Eleanor Parker as an actress and her performance here in Interrupted Melody?
Love Eleanor Parker. Just in general, think she's fabulous, totally underrated as an actress. I don't understand why she's not doing an accent in this movie. It's like everyone is doing varying levels of Australian accents around her in the first few scenes, and then she's just not. And I do not understand. Like, a bad Australian accent would have made more sense than her not doing any Australian accent. But that being said, good on her for recognizing that while she could sing, she could not sing this well, and at least, making the attempt to say, like, I am going to at least look like I am actually singing, as opposed to so many people who just sort of stand there and move their mouths. So it did, like, I never was watching this being like, if she's not singing, or, oh, that's so obviously lip synced, which is good to have in a story about a singer who actually lived. But I do think that she's good in the movie, but like, well, she's better than Jennifer Jones.
Okay, well, I guess that's the bar.
I mean, that's literally the bar.
Yeah.
For this category. She's better than that. And I think there are moments when I think she's really great. Her physical acting when she is stricken with polio and does not really have control of the lower half of her body is pretty good. And I do think she gets some emotional scenes that are very well done. I also like this is very petty of me, but like given the story that we just heard about Jennifer Lawrence and William Holden, I love that she was like, well,
Jennifer Jones and William Holden, not Jennifer Lawrence.
did I say Jennifer Lawrence?
Yes.
Oh God, I'm thinking Marjorie Lawrence in this movie.
Yeah.
Jennifer Jones. Oh God. Okay. Wow.
Yes, go ahead.
So yeah. So compare and contrast with what we just heard about Jennifer Jones and William Holden and Love is a Many-Splendored Thing. Eleanor Parker was just like, well, Glenn Ford is an asshole, but he's the right person for this part. So you know what? If he wants to have top billing in a movie in which he is the supportive husband of the lead, let the little man have it.
Yeah. I mean,
rise above, Eleanor Parker. Continue to rise above as you always did. I like her in the movie. Is it worthy of an Oscar nomination? I'm indifferent.
So no.
Yeah, I certainly don't understand what this movie was doing winning an Oscar for its screenplay.
I have so many questions.
so many questions. But like, she's fine. She's fine. I don't have a problem with her other than the lack of accent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've come to definitely appreciate Eleanor Parker quite a bit over the course of these last few episodes. I did mention this in a previous episode. I feel like I have a little bit of face blindness sometimes with her, where she's just really just able to disappear into a role, and I'm never really thinking about Eleanor. Like, I'm thinking about the character and what she's going through, and I think that's actually a really special ability that she has for someone who did lead multiple films, to sort of just shapeshift into these different characters, but also to not really have like a persona necessarily. And yet she doesn't feel like anonymous, you know? It's not like she's just an average actress. She was really, really good. And I think this was her big shot at a big, glossy, sort of studio prestige picture. And I think for the most part, she lives up to it. I don't think this is an all-timer performance by any means, but she is able to do a lot, I think, with a pretty thinly written character. And I actually think it pairs pretty well with another film that I just talked about recently, which is With a Song in My Heart.
Yes!
The Susan Hayward film from 1952, where she is also playing a real-life singer who has to deal with, you know, certain injuries and such, and went on to entertain the troops. But it's not only like those surface similarities, but it's also that thing where it's like a great showcase for the real-life singer, and it probably helped to raise Marjorie Lawrence's profile pretty big. But character-wise, I still don't feel like I have a great read on the character, other than here's a really good singer who liked to sing.
Yeah.
So there's only so much she can do.
Yeah.
But I think she also, I don't know, she has a certain confidence in her abilities, I think, that does prove that she had what it took to be like a diva who knows what she wants, especially in those earlier scenes before it really turned into like a standard 50s romance type of story. And she's sort of suggesting this feeling that she shouldn't have to give certain things up, but that gradually, like, being in this relationship with the Glenn Ford character is just chipping away at her, and she just wants to hang on to this relationship. But yeah, honestly, I feel like I've seen this done better before in like A Star Is Born, and even to a certain extent with A Song in My Heart, and it sort of feels like it's cribbing off of other showbiz romance types of films at that time. So yeah, I don't know how this could possibly win Best Original Screenplay. I'm still looking for answers there. But apparently it was popular enough. It got multiple nominations. So yeah.
Like, I guess you had to be there to understand what the
Once
fuss
again,
about this
you had to
movie
be there.
was, but like,
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe they just really love Marjorie Lawrence.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, I was actually intrigued, much like you were saying about Love is a Many-Splendored
Yeah.
Thing. Like, the beginning promised a certain type of story that I feel like I didn't quite get, where we see her, like, escaping this farm and just, like, running away
Yeah.
with her dog in her arm.
So cute.
And, which was like, oh, this is interesting. This is like a story of a young woman who wanted to escape the confines of country life, and her family is like disapproving of her, of wanting to pursue a career in the arts, but she's gonna make it on her own.
Yeah.
But then it's like most of her family just supports her anyway, and
Yeah.
she's like worried about her father's approval, but then like a scene later he's like, really happy for you, follow your dreams, kid.
Yeah. I just also like, it's one of those things like we were saying with I'll Cry Tomorrow. It's like all of a sudden she's a big star now.
Yeah. Happens very quickly. Yes.
Very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I feel like the family stuff isn't really brought up that much again. Like, her
Yeah.
father dies at one point very early on, and her brother is played by Roger Moore himself.
Right.
He's her manager. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to do with like family per se. It just sort of goes into this, suddenly she's a star, and then she's in this relationship with the Glenn Ford character, and that's just what it becomes about.
Yeah.
I would have appreciated if it was more holistically about her.
Yeah, I do.
And her story.
It's interesting. Like, I do kind of like the I like, in theory, the way that this movie embraces the whole lopsidedness and switching around of the gender roles when the woman is the primary breadwinner, or not even necessarily the primary breadwinner, but like the more well-known and respected half of a married couple, as opposed to the man. But in practice, it's just sort of like the subject is mentioned, and we kind of see how Glenn Ford's character feels about it, but it doesn't really delve in any significant way. And there's a lot of things about this movie that are like, in theory, better than the actual execution of it. I thought there's an opportunity to talk about a lot, but it kind of washes over all of that, which I'm all for movies that are under 2 hours long, but like, you could have taken more time with this and given these people more things to play. One of the things that I actually do kind of love about this movie is that Eleanor Parker, she's not just playing Marjorie Lawrence, she is also playing like all these great characters from operas.
I know,
because she sings like one aria from like, I don't know, 5 or 6 in like the first half of the movie. And for a while there, I was like, are we just getting like a tour of the world's greatest operas for the rest of this? Because like, I wouldn't mind that, actually. Like, that could be kind of fun. And then
it's just her donning all these different wigs. Lip syncing for her life.
Lip syncing for her life. I truly a legend ahead of her time.
Truly. And that really didn't help with my face blindness with her, because she really, really transformed into those characters. So once again, good for her.
I mean, and she's wonderful when she's doing that. It's just like, again, like, there was opportunity to say lots of interesting things about Marjorie Lawrence, about being a performer who is stricken with an inability to perform, and in the end all it has to say is like, being a performer is wonderful, being unable to perform sucks.
Yeah, which doesn't really feel specific to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Although I do think one interesting recurring bit that we get throughout the film is that she's very often having like stage fright.
Oh, yes.
Like,
yes.
They announce that she's ready to come on, and she suddenly panics and like runs away. I mean, not necessarily fun for her, but it's a fun sort of running gag.
Yeah.
Where, you know, she's very scared to go on stage. But I think for as relatively weak as this screenplay is, I think what Eleanor is able to do is really show what I do think a lot of artists may feel at certain times, which is just sort of how exposing it is to open yourself up to the world and open yourself up to criticism and ridicule and all these things. But then it's like, how do you get past that fear and sort of press on anyway and just do it?
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing I really keyed into with this character, is this idea that this woman was so gifted, and even despite that, she was like still paralyzed with fear in certain points in her life. And there's kind of an expressiveness in Eleanor Parker that is similar to her performance in Caged, where she has that fear of what's happening in the situation without going too over the top into like campiness, like, you know, silent acting, like gesturing.
Yes.
But you find yourself really, for me personally, I always find myself rooting for her. So she just has that sort of innate goodness, I suppose, which can carry me through some of the weaker moments here.
Yeah, it is another case, kind of similar to Summertime, where it feel like you put another actress in this role and it's probably going to be worse than this. Not necessarily bad, but definitely not this good.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think just the relationship stuff, I'm not fully buying this connection that they have, personally speaking.
I bought it in the very first scene they had together.
Yeah, which is like a meet cute type
the meet
thing.
cute
Sure.
is great, and everything that happens in that first time when they meet is wonderful. But then, like, when they reconnect years later, I'm like, did y'all like check to see if the chemistry was still there or not before getting together? Like, maybe you want to do that.
Yeah. So for me, it just, again, sort of went downhill as we started to focus more and more on that relationship. So that's kind of unfortunate. But I did just want to mention before we get to the end, I did enjoy the scene where she insisted on riding a horse into the fire on stage.
Oh, yes, I loved it.
And she actually does it, which I think was a stunt double, but still.
Yeah, who cares? I love that. Like, I'm sure that must be something that Marjorie Lawrence herself actually did.
Yes, it is.
Which is
yes.
like,
I had to look that up because it's too random to not be.
It's like, you know what? More power to her. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I enjoyed those moments where she did really insist on her own creative vision, because for a lot of the second half of the film, it's just kind of her being stifled and having to depend on her husband, and it's just kind of a bummer by the end to just see her struggling the whole time. And then he kind of like manipulates her in a way.
Yes.
Because he puts on her record and like puts it at the other end of the room, and he knows that she can't really just like get up and walk over there and turn it off, and she's in misery and she has to like crawl over and turn it off, and somehow that inspires her to be like, oh, maybe I can actually be a person in the world and perform again.
I love the way that like the intertextuality of the films this year, like how that scene like is very similar to, I'm like, see, like he's not as bad as Susan Hayward's drunk of a husband in I'll Cry Tomorrow, but like also like there's this scene in Rosetta 2 when Burt Lancaster turns on the player piano and she doesn't know how to turn it off, but get it off, and it leads to like, you know, an emotional moment for the two of them. And
yeah,
I like this. The movies are speaking to each other and I love it.
I know, they're in communication. I love it when there's a common theme. Yes. One other scene I just wanted to mention towards the end is when she is singing to a bunch of like injured army men at a hospital. She's singing Over the Rainbow. I believe that was all in one take as well. I did notice that. And obviously lip syncing, but still, you know, she's using a wheelchair. And yeah, there's something about that scene. I don't know if it's just the song choice, you know, but the way that her expressions, I feel like they really it feels like she's connecting to the lyrics and with these soldiers who were injured. And I don't know, probably the most affecting scene in the film for me, where she really is like, that's one of those moments that I love in these kinds of stories and biopics about entertainers, where you feel the connection that a performer has with the audience and vice versa, and you believe why this person became as significant as they became.
Absolutely. And I do think this feels like one of those performances that gets nominated for an Oscar that, like, it was all an Oscar nomination for this performance was kind of always in the cards, like from
Yeah.
the time the project was announced. Like, oh, they're making a biopic of Marjorie Lawrence. Well, that person is in for an Oscar, you
Yes.
know? And I'll say that, like, while I'm not sure that she fully earns the nomination, she does not make a bad showing for herself by any means. All that the
Right.
script asks her to do, she does, and does really, really well. It's just that I don't think the script actually asks a whole lot of her.
Right. It's pretty surface
Yeah.
level. And unfortunately, she can only, again, do so much, and she doesn't really fully transcend like other actresses, like Katharine Hepburn, for example, have been able to do. So, yeah, it's a safe nomination, but was probably never in contention to win necessarily.
But, great wigs, beautiful wigs.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioning that, like, this was always going to be in the conversation for a nomination just reminds me of what we always do on Twitter when we see like a press photo of like the first photo. It's like, oh, Rami Malek or Renee Zellweger.
Yeah.
Like we're seeing Eleanor Parker like
look
on a horse on stage.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, she's getting that nomination. But I have enjoyed talking about Eleanor Parker in this very specific window of time that the Academy nominated her and then never again. But yeah, sometimes they really like you for a very short period of time, and this was her time. And I will definitely be mentioning her more on the Sound of Music episode, but it's been fun, sort of, not that I didn't like her before, but it's been nice to sort of feel a bit more passion towards her now through doing this and watching her 3 nominations, which are very, very different from each other. So I would encourage people to check out all 3 of her nominations, which are all pretty good, which not everyone can say that. Cough, cough, Jennifer Jones.
Oh, God.
Anyway, shall we move on to our big winner?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's get to it. Anna Magnani for The Rose Tattoo. So, personally speaking, I'm very excited to be talking about another Best Actress winner who is older, who isn't like a glamorous leading lady type. You know, we've had Marie Dressler, we've had Shirley Booth, and now we have Anna Magnani. I sort of group them all together in a way. She was an Italian actress, widely celebrated in Italy. She was in Rome Open City, directed by Roberto Rossellini, which made her an international star. She was in Bellissima, which also raised her profile, The Golden Coach, and then Tennessee Williams was a huge fan of hers and actually wrote the character in The Rose Tattoo with her in mind, but she was still kind of shaky with her English, so she turned it down, and it went to Maureen Stapleton, who actually won a Tony for the role. So there's that. Tony-winning role here, and now an Oscar-winning role. But then she ultimately did agree to do this film adaptation, and so she's playing Serafina, who is a Sicilian woman living near the Gulf of Mexico. She has a daughter, Rosa. She has her husband, Rosario, who has a rose tattoo on his chest, the titular role. So I guess Rosario is also some kind of smuggler, and he goes off one night and gets into an accident and dies. This happens very early in the film, so not a spoiler. But she's obviously grieving, and she struggles to get over this for like 3 years. And her daughter starts to have an affair with a sailor, which she isn't really approving of in the beginning. But then Serafina also gets into this relationship with a guy named Alvaro, played by Burt Lancaster, who's kind of just like a big dumb lug.
That's
A
one way
lot
of
to get
putting
into
it.
with that performance. Yeah. But he decides to get a rose tattoo, which just causes her to explode. And she also realizes that her husband was having an affair on the side. So she's going through a lot here, you know? Let's get to it. Thoughts on Anna Magnani and her Oscar-winning performance?
It's weird watching this performance. Where are we, like 70 something, 80 something years after the fact? Because I feel like I have to give her the benefit of the doubt because she actually is Italian, but like it feels so stereotypical in so many ways that like there were a lot of parts while watching this that's like I was laughing because it's so perfectly dead on. Like, of course, this character would do and say that or act in this way, but
Yeah.
I don't think that that's like because she's doing a bad job or because she's leaning into the stereotype. I think that it's because, like, I mean, it's Tennessee Williams, the man did know how to write, and Anna Magnani very obviously knows how to act. And it's just every choice that the two of them made just feels like, oh yeah, like that's literally that is the choice. That is exactly what this person would do or say in that moment. Period.
Yeah.
And I do, I had a moment while watching this movie because it's clear now to me, and I did not know this, but I had never seen this movie before. And I was like, this is where Diane Wiest got "Don't Speak" from.
Yes. I thought of that too.
I'm like sitting there going like, oh my god,
Don't speak.
don't speak, don't speak. Very, very different context, but I'm like,
Yes,
I would
very much so.
not put it past Woody Allen to have specifically chosen those words because of this.
Yeah.
Anyway, that aside, it's like if you, I had seen Rome Open City before this and was floored by Anna Magnani in that. I mean, she is just, and she does exactly that here too. And I can't say that there is anything in this performance that particularly surprised me, having already seen Rome Open City. But like again, it's just like everything that she does feels absolutely perfect in the moment. I have nothing bad to say about her performance in this movie at all. She goes through the ringer. She goes through every possible emotion I think that you could go through, and there is a groundedness to her performance, to her acting style, that I don't think had fully taken hold in most American acting yet. That it felt everything she does and says feels very off the cuff and just in response. It feels like she is really there, really reacting to everything that is happening around her. And when she gets the big dramatic moments, she goes for it, and she has chosen which of those moments. She's very carefully chosen which of those to go really big. I just feel like she is like the archetypal Italian mother / widow.
She is the blueprint.
She is. She is the blueprint. Like everything about her is just like, yep. Nod your head and yep. That's my, my great grandmama or, whoever. Like, pick Italian woman that like,
right.
That's her. Yeah. That's her.
Yeah.
She is the archetype. She said it, and it's a really, really good performance. I think it was incredibly smart of her to say when it first came to her for to do on stage. She said, I'm not comfortable enough with my English. Let me get my English ready so that I can do it eventually, and
Yeah.
it was worth the wait.
Yeah. For me, I really do love when an actress of a certain age is given the opportunity to show really just what she's made of in a leading role,
Mhm.
because of how few and far between we saw that in classic Hollywood. And I mean, frankly, how little we see that even nowadays.
Yeah.
But it really was refreshing to watch this performance at the end of, binge watching this year's nominees.
Yeah.
For as much as I like a lot of the other actresses we talked about, this feels like something new. She has such a naturalistic approach, even in the middle of this very theatrical Tennessee Williams production, where she's still having to shout and cry and go through all the emotions in the book. She still is finding a soul in this character, and she's given the space to just show her very natural abilities and just convey this humanity and her grief and her pain and her anger. It's actually, for me, a really interesting compliment to Comeback Little Sheba and what Shirley Booth is doing there.
Yeah.
Also opposite Burt Lancaster, also a woman of a certain age. And for her, Shirley Booth is a fragile, sensitive, sort of warm personality in that film. And then here, Anna Magnani is kind of bitter, and she's really hurting, and she doesn't seem to trust people, and she just explodes in anger on many occasions. And you can look at Serafina here in The Rose Tattoo, and if you don't know their stories, and if her and Shirley Booth, if you don't know these two women's stories, their characters, you can look at it on the outside and you can judge them or feel a certain way about them. But it's like, because the story is centering their perspective, we sort of come to know them, and we see that they're both just in a lot of pain, but that they express that pain in different ways. So that's why I feel like, even though these two performances are quite different from each other, there actually is a weird overlap here that is beyond just the Burt Lancaster connection.
Yeah,
It's
I like
it's
that.
that feeling of them having to, like, how they express themselves. They have both gone through so much trauma in their life, in their past, and they're having to overcome certain things and grieve. And now, how do I channel that into my interactions with people in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I particularly love how she delineates Serafina's feelings towards other characters.
Yeah.
Like, she the other Italian ladies, she's just like, ugh, they're just annoying little flies or like birds that keep pecking at her and pecking at her. And then there are the southern ladies who you want, can you sew a shirt for me? And that she is, like, you disgust me, get out. And her daughter, who obviously, like, complicated to say the least.
Yeah.
And which, like, you talked about your face blindness with Eleanor Parker throughout half of this movie. I was like, God, they really would not let Natalie Wood play Russian or American, would they? And then I realized it was not Natalie Wood.
Wow. Wow.
So sorry.
I mean, I get it, but
nominee
wow.
for this movie, Marissa Pavin, which,
yes,
okay, choices.
Yeah.
Like, not bad, but okay, fine.
Yeah.
And the scenes with Burt Lancaster.
Oh boy, yeah.
I love Burt Lancaster. His win for Elmer Gantry is one of my favorite of all
Really
time. Best actor. I love him in that movie. But this is not one of his better performances.
Yeah, this is not his finest hour.
Not as
by any means.
He just decided to go big.
Big.
And
yes.
Oh boy, does that really great going up against Anna Magnani's very grounded, earthy, realist performance.
Yeah.
Um,
They are in two very different movies.
very different movies. And like, I kind of appreciate how it's not like the first scene or two he has, you're like, God, like this guy is just really friendly and gregarious.
Mm,
And then the next time you see him, he's taking a giant swig out of a bottle. It's like, oh,
yeah.
that tracks
Mm-hmm.
sense now. And that revelation sort of changed how you view his performance. But like, I think part of it is the character. I just like really hate that character a
Yeah.
lot. Um, so like, good job, Bert. You were perfectly hateful in this role, but also like it doesn't really mesh well. And I think that's kind of the point,
Mm,
given that it's Tennessee Williams.
yeah.
But I don't think it works very well. And while I love her in those scenes and the way that she reacts to him, I did kind of find those scenes like a little difficult to get through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't really read a lot into whether there was any tension between the two of them
Yeah.
necessarily, but I did sense that just in the scenes between the two of them that like she would probably be a little bit thrown off by
Mm.
the energy he was bringing to a lot of those scenes.
I mean, he's just bringing a lot.
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot.
And I don't know if he's like overcompensating for her being more natural. It's just a weird
Yeah.
combination there, but
Yeah.
I do just for her, I love how she does sort of assess other people, like you said, like when she's like sizing up Rosa's boyfriend
Yeah. Oh
and
my
like
God.
trying to figure out his intentions.
When she tells him to kneel and like pray
Yeah.
to the mother,
To the Blessed Virgin. Yes.
loved that. And like she tells him exactly what to say, and like she keeps trying to like get her daughter out of the house, go away. The daughter's
Mhm.
screaming from outside, "What are you doing to him? Stop!" She like,
Yeah.
get on your knees, pray to the Virgin, say exactly what I'm going to say to you, and as soon as he says that he'll respect her, it's all of a sudden, okay, you're a member of the family now. We drink.
Yes.
It's just so perfectly Italian. I can't.
I mean, a lot of great hand gestures
Oh
in
God,
this,
the hand
right?
acting, fantastic.
Yes. The handography,
The
if you will.
handography, yes. The acting with her clothes, with
Yeah.
the shawl, or grabbing
Yes.
her robe.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Which I think we're led to believe that she's basically wearing that robe for about 3
Yeah.
years. Which is fair. Which is probably true to the character.
Probably.
You know.
Yeah.
So
The Italian widows take mourning very seriously.
yeah. Obviously she has a lot of big confrontation type scenes that are very juicy and baity, quote unquote, for her. But
which one was your favorite?
I mean all of her interactions with the other woman, Estelle, are a lot of fun for me. Where eventually she does go over and she demands to be taken to her, and she does reveal that the tattoo is also on her chest.
Which, what a moment.
The drama of it all, I was living for it.
that woman
And
knew what she had.
Yes. And she goes home and she's like smashing the urn.
Oh God.
I mean, this really has kind of everything that we want in like an actressing type of performance.
Truly. I think my favorite is when she goes to town at the first time that she meets Burt Lancaster, and she accosts the priest.
Yes.
Which at first, like, she can't even go into the church. You know, it's too painful for her to go to the church. And then she asks the priest, like, did he ever confess to you that he was seeing someone else? You tell me, I need to know, I have to know. And he's like, go away, woman. No, I can't possibly. And she keeps accosting him.
Yeah. Which again feels very much like Italian widow, you know?
Very. I like, it's probably very stereotypical of me, but I kept thinking of Moonstruck. And like, you just know that those women would do, anything happened. Like, they're going to the priest. So my husband, what did he say to you in confession? You tell me. You tell me.
Right. Ugh, yeah. But I mean, she does also, I think, do really well in the more vulnerable moments where,
Mm.
like, I really like the moment a little bit earlier in the film where her daughter calls her disgusting.
Oh,
And she's like, "Did you hear
did
what
you?
my daughter called me?
Yes.
She called me
Did you
disgusting."
hear what
And
my
she's
daughter
like,
called me?
she's like a much quieter register, you
Yeah.
know? Even the don't speak moment is similar for me,
Yeah.
where she's just doing a lot in terms of her line delivery, in terms of varying
Mm.
her performance and not always making everything into a big histrionic moment
Yeah.
that it could have been in another actress's hands,
Hmm.
that I was very impressed by.
Yeah.
So,
It felt like when I was in college and there was one acting class where we had to go through a monologue and the teacher was like, I want you to chart this monologue from like, A to Z. Z
mhm,
being, the point that the character is at the end of the monologue versus where they are at the beginning, and chart that journey throughout the speech, but don't double back. Don't go, get to like H and then go all the way back to A.
right.
Just keep going and don't play the same note twice. And it felt like
Hmm.
she really did that throughout the whole movie. She was never um, playing everything at, she never played any two scenes at the same pitch.
Right.
um, she did not linger on any, even though the character is very much lingering in her grief. She found every moment to have a different shade of that grief, and
Hmm.
I really, really liked that.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point, and I do think that audiences in America, even people in the industry, were probably really taken aback by that particular
Hmm.
style.
Oh, I'm sure.
And
Yeah.
I think this is a good place where we can transition into why she won,
Hmm.
which is certainly she is an X factor in the middle of this lineup full of actresses that had multiple nominations before this. Some of them had won before, but she was really this new face, in not just in the lineup, but just representing the whole neo-realist acting style
Yeah.
of Italian cinema. I think there was that special feeling of sometimes the Academy likes to look towards the future with
Hmm.
certain wins, that they like to coronate people or just anoint them and say, here we go, here's your stamp of, like, we approve of what you're doing, we can't
Yeah.
wait to see you shine next. Like, we just talked about that with Grace Kelly, even
Oh
though that
yeah.
didn't really go anywhere. But
Well.
at the time, I'm sure they knew that they felt like she was going to be the star for years and
Hmm.
years. And for this, I think they saw something unique here that they hadn't really come across before.
Hmm.
And what I also think is worth noting is that she was more or less the Monique of her time, in the sense that she said, "I'm not going to do any campaigning. I'm going to let the performance speak for itself."
Damn
She didn't
right.
do any events. She didn't do any glad handing. She didn't even attend the Oscars. She just let it speak for itself,
Hmm. I
and she won.
We stan a queen who makes it all
Yeah.
about the work.
Mm-hmm.
Although, like, I love that you called it the X factor that she had, because for me, her X factor is that she was the person that Roberto Rossellini left for Ingrid Bergman.
Well, yes,
So
there
there
is
was
that.
that angle too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You mean next year's Best Actress winner?
Hmm, what do you know?
Yes. But in terms of the race, there wasn't, from what I understand, a lot of competition because she won everything. She won
Yeah.
the Golden Globe, she won a BAFTA for Best Foreign Actress, she won the New York Film Critics Award, she won the National Board of Review. It was a clean sweep for Anna Magnani.
Although it should be noted that Susan Hayward won Best Actress at Cannes.
Yes. And that's pretty much it
Yeah.
in terms of anyone else winning anything. Yeah, I don't think any of the other three actually won anything, even if like
No.
Katharine Hepburn was a runner-up at New York, things
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, I don't think this was a big race overall, other than Susan Hayward maybe putting up a fight just because she had 4 nominations now,
Yep.
and it feels like maybe this time, and this felt like, again, it's like combining all the different elements of what she did before into this one big super performance.
Oh God.
And now,
Kevin, now I just want to hear Susan Hayward sing Maybe This Time from Cabaret.
oh. I bet she would really interpret those lyrics
right?
in an interesting way. Yes.
Right? I can hear it.
I can also envision it as like her semi-drunk while singing that.
Oh my God, yes. Oh, she would make a
Maybe
great
this
Sally
time.
Bowles.
Yes. Wow, what an image. But do you have any other thoughts on why you think Anna Magnani was our winner here?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like you have the Rossetto really kind of sticks out in this lineup, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You have like I'll Cry Tomorrow and Interrupted Melody, which are very, sort of traditional performer biopics overcoming some adversity. And you have the romances, Love is a Many-Splendored Thing and Summertime. And the Rossetto is Tennessee Williams.
Yeah.
Because he is his own genre at this point.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's also much darker than the others. It is more tragically dramatic. There's more for her to dig into and delve in a more I'll say obvious way than all the other performances, except maybe I'll Cry Tomorrow. There's a lot there. And Summertime, but that's more, Katharine Hepburn is really digging into that more subtly than I think everyone else is in their performances. So I think just the fact that it stands out, it demands you pay attention. And when you have her who is, new and exciting, and something that I think at the time people had seen and respected her work with Rossellini in the Italian neorealist films, because they were, even if maybe they didn't nominate those films for Oscars, they saw them. They liked those films.
Mm-hmm.
And you have her, if Susan Hayward is her closest competition, it's like, oh, well, we know you.
Your old hat.
Yeah, your old hat. But this Italian woman, we can finally award her. And
right.
They were gonna take that option as opposed to Susan Hayward, who's like, she's a big star in the studio system. She'll be back. Even though it had been 4 times at that point, like, no, you can wait one more nomination.
Yeah. And look, I mean, that doesn't always play out well for certain actresses, but in her case, she was very lucky in that it did.
Yep.
Because I very easily could have seen a scenario where like this was it for her and they missed their opportunity.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's just the most operatic type of performance here. And I think they were very much in a mood for that type of thing at this time, very specifically. Like, we had Come Back Little Sheba, we had Streetcar Named Desire to a certain extent, even though it's a comedic performance. Judy Holliday in Born Yesterday. There's just something about, I mean, Grace Kelly and The Country Girl.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about play to film that really appealed a lot to the Academy, specifically in this category at this time. So she was just the next one to do that. But again, I do think she had that special quality to her that was very exciting. And there's always that shiny new thing in the race. And sometimes it's a older Italian woman in her 50s who's just doing her first English language film.
And sometimes they also do, like, I think sometimes the Academy gets that whiff of like, you maybe don't care about us the way we care about you, and like, please like us, here's an award. Like, Katharine Hepburn never showed up to the ceremony to accept one of her Oscars, never. And they just like, here, have another one. And let's be like Frances McDormand.
Yeah.
did
Even though
not.
she does show up, but she doesn't
She
care.
doesn't care, and they're like, yes, no, please love us, love us.
Yeah. They like when they play hard to
They
get,
really
you know.
do. They really do.
Sometimes they don't like it when you want it too much.
Hmm.
Other times they do.
Yes, it
They're
depends.
very fickle, the
Yes.
Academy. All right, well, let's get to some Twitter questions and close this out, shall we? Christoph said Anna Magnani was already a highly esteemed actress of world cinema when she won the Oscar. Was this maybe a case of the Academy giving itself credence by adding her name to the winners list? Also, if that was the case, why didn't it work for Catherine Deneuve and Isabelle Huppert on their only career nomination?
Ooh.
Good question.
I'll say this. I think that kind of like you were just saying, there's a real operatic quality to this role and
Yeah.
Anna's performance that kind of cries out for you award it. Catherine Deneuve is a great actress and should have, multiple Oscar nominations under her belt, but Indochine is and Isabelle Huppert is
Okay.
again, like a fantastic actress who should have multiple Oscar nominations, but she is like very prickly as a persona, and that performance in Elle is even pricklier.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a part that asks the audience to do a lot. And I don't think that audiences particularly like to do that, especially with like foreign. I mean, that's the other thing, is that like Anna Magnani was performing in English and Isabelle and Catherine were performing in French.
Yeah. And I think it's also just whatever the competition was in those years.
Yeah.
It's easy to sort of be like, why this, but not this and this, when really it's just like, we have to look at three very individual, specific years and decades even of the dynamics there. And you just look at, 92, right? Where Emma, I almost said Emma Stone.
I know.
That's the other one. Emma Thompson, the two Emmas.
Yes.
Emma Thompson playing a pretty likable character there. Emma Stone playing a likable character in La La Land. It's, those are more easy to get behind, I think, than the competition that Anna Magnani had, where I don't know if there's like a Grace Kelly type per se.
Right.
To fall back on.
Yeah, there's not really a young up-and-comer in this field.
So that might be part of it. Marcel said, why do I get strong Meryl Streep vibes while watching Anna Magnani?
Because Bridges of Madison County?
Very good point. Yeah, my friend Izzy from Be Kind Rewind said something to that effect. She said that a lot of people, after she posted her video on Anna Magnani, mentioned like, hey, she looked a lot like Meryl Streep, and she didn't really see it. I personally don't really like see it outside of like the eyes maybe are similar. But yeah, I could see the Bridges connection. I imagine Meryl might have looked at Anna Magnani a little bit before she made Bridges, possibly. I'm just making stuff up. I don't even know.
Well, it's hard, right? Because like I actually don't think they look a lot alike at all. I can, like, if I like squint, I can kind of see similarities in their acting style. But I think that, especially with the Bridges, like when Meryl had her hair darker and she was sort of embracing that more earthy, down home quality than she had previously, I think that is a very strong callback to the sort of template that this performance set.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, which also, like, shout out, hi Izzy, I love your YouTube channel.
Izzy is the best. Yes.
Really, really.
Miles McHale said Anna Magnani's role was played on Broadway by future Oscar winner Maureen Stapleton. Would she have been a good fit in the film?
It would have likely been a very different film.
Yeah. Would have been fun to see. I'm a fan of Maureen.
I honestly, I really would have liked to have seen that Maureen Stapleton energy play off of Burt Lancaster in this.
That could have worked.
That could have worked. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've only honestly seen Maureen Stapleton mostly in supporting roles. I don't
Yeah.
know how a leading role for her would look, but yeah, she'd probably be a good
Yeah.
fit.
And I don't think I've
Maybe
seen.
not as natural as Anna Magnani, but still.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I don't think I've seen anything from her at this point in her career.
Yeah, no.
So I don't even know
Only her
what
later
to
stuff. Yeah.
expect. Yeah.
Right. Mark Brinkerhoff said, Anna Magnani's win seems to be the first and only instance of Oscars embracing neo-realism in actressing. What do you make of such an outlier in the 50s? Well, I think it does speak to how Hollywood just sort of has to acknowledge something when it proves that it's, popular. At a certain point, it's just kind of undeniable. And there was a sort of draw to this style of acting because, the old ways may have been getting a little stale.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same reason that people became interested in method acting with the Streetcar cast, It's showing that you can do something new on screen. As for why this was like the only time in the 50s, I do know that there was also some sentiment still of wanting to reward homegrown actors. The Hedda Hoppers of the world were often writing about, like, why are we giving Oscars to British people and Italians? What's happening? Yes.
Yeah, I think, too, that, like, you have to remember that the Academy voters are, like, they make movies and they watch movies, and at the time, people were a lot more open to foreign films than they are now.
Yeah.
And, like, the foreign filmmakers, Fellini and Bergman and Rossellini, people really loved their movies. Kurosawa, too. These are films that if you read interviews from people at that time, people would mention they loved those movies and they saw them, they awarded them. Fellini particularly was a big, kind of celebrity amongst the Hollywood set because they loved those movies. So I think their biggest hurdle to awarding those types of movies have always been that they just weren't in English. And here is one of the actresses who made the Italian neorealist movement what it was, giving a neorealist performance in an American film, speaking in English and Italian, but mostly in English.
Right.
It's a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm. Fritz, was I'll Cry Tomorrow filmed inside a woman's soul? So I didn't mention this, but the tagline
love such a great tagline.
I'll Cry Tomorrow. Let me read this as dramatically as I can.
Yes.
This story was filmed on location inside a woman's soul.
Thank you. I mean, what a tagline.
Yes.
What a tagline.
Exclamation point at the end, by the way. I mean, I think it was filmed directly inside a woman's soul.
Absolutely. It was filmed all completely inside of Susan Hayward's mind.
Yes. Miles McHale said, is this the best of Susan Hayward's sad, fabulous drunks?
That is the perfect descriptor of them. And I think yes.
I think yes. Having seen the nominations that she got for her sad, fabulous drunks, I think this is the ultimate version of that specific archetype that she randomly carved a niche for herself for in this time. Let's move on to some questions about Katharine Hepburn. Fritz said, would Shirley Booth have worked in David Lean's version of Summertime?
Oh, right, because she originated the part in the play
yes.
on Broadway.
Yep.
I think probably, yeah. Would she have been as good as Katharine Hepburn? I don't think so, but I do think she would have been good. She certainly has that quality to make that character. Yeah.
I think so, too. Would have been pretty different, but I would like to see it. I think that would be really sweet.
Yeah.
Movie. Nathan Bigley said, Summertime has such a beautiful message that I feel like resonates so much today. If this movie were remade in present day, who would you cast in Catherine's place? We got a casting question. I always love these.
Okay. I had an answer and then it feels like cheating because she kind of already has made a kind of remake of this movie. I was going to say Patricia Clarkson, but Cairo time is basically summertime but Egypt. So
Sure. Yeah.
um
Fair enough.
so
Well,
your answer and I'll come back.
this is where I can bring back what I said at the very beginning, which is that there's a performance from the most recent Best Actress lineup that slightly gave me vibes of this, and I will say Olivia Colman.
Oh, yeah.
Give me Olivia Colman having a summertime fling in Venice.
Yeah.
So slight vibes of The Lost Daughter. Two very different plots, but
Oh my
you know,
God.
single woman going off on a vacation. Things happen. There's a certain loneliness to these characters. Listen, I know they're very different, but I'm just saying. Just saying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think I could possibly top that. So let's
Fair enough.
move
Okay.
on.
So Joey Hunter said, was Jennifer Jones' best performance not in any of her nominated roles, but actually in Indiscretion of an American Wife or Stazione Termini?
I haven't seen Indiscretion of an American Wife,
Yeah.
but I, like I said, not really a big Jennifer Jones fan.
Same. And then Mark Brinkerhoff said, why did Lily White Jennifer Jones keep getting cast as half or no half women of color in dubious star vehicles?
Somebody
Another great
please
question.
tell me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
It's just a lot of like misguided, I hate to say it, but like vanity projects more often than not for her, where it's really a lot of David O. Selznick sort of pushing her into these different roles that she didn't belong in.
Yeah, I was gonna say like, it has to just be like David O. Selznick, but
Yeah. Joey Gentili has something to say.
Hey, Joey.
He says Eleanor Parker, while she clearly should have been the 1950 Best Actress winner for Caged, and it is her best performance.
Oh God.
She thought Interrupted Melody was her greatest. Do you agree with her? And where the hell is the accent work?
Really, where the hell is the accent work?
Nowhere to be found.
I mean, like we said, I think when we were talking about it, it kind of like ticks all the boxes. It is a role that asks a lot in terms of like, play this person, but also play them playing all these different iconic parts. And also for half the film, you're not going to be able to use your legs. And I think that especially for actors, the amount of work that you put into prep for something can certainly sort of like twist your brain a little into thinking that maybe the performance is maybe a bit better than the ones that you didn't put so much prep work into. And she prepped a lot for this movie. So I think that, when you look back on that, it's like you get the objective best of your movie, best of your work in movies mixed up with the one that you felt you put the most work into, and that paid off, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I would not agree with this being her greatest.
No.
I actually do think her best of those three is Caged. So there's that.
I would agree.
I can see why she connected to the story and this character and everything.
She should not have won for Caged under any circumstances.
Let's dispel that.
Let's just please get rid of that idea right now.
Yes.
But yes, I do think Caged is probably, of her Oscar-nominated performance, her best one, yeah.
Emily said, poor Eleanor Parker was the only woman of this lineup to never win a competitive Oscar. Do you think she was too versatile or without a star persona for her own good?
I think that's it, without the star persona. Especially during this time, they liked to typecast people and then reward them with when they got their ultimate typecast part. And she was not so easily typecast, or typecast in roles that do not necessarily ask them to bring the fireworks in a way that the Academy usually notices.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, for as much as I've definitely grown to really respect her work in this decade, especially, to me, she's more of like hardworking actress, more
Mm-hmm.
so than movie star.
Yeah.
And her style just isn't as flashy or volcanic as they said of Anna
Hmm.
Magnani at the time
Yeah.
to really get to that place. I would actually argue that someone like Amy Adams is in a similar boat,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
who I think is definitely a movie star in her own right, but has a more understated approach
Mm-hmm.
more often than not.
Yes.
And then when she does go big, like in Hillbilly Elegy, it's not great.
God. Uh, they had the
So
opportunity with Enchanted.
they did, and they were like,
No.
nope, no, too fluffy.
Yep.
But still, probably her best performance.
Agreed.
I don't know. Yeah, or like obviously everyone always mentions Arrival. Same deal there.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a handful of miscellaneous questions here. This one is really fun from Cinema Sex Kitten.
Oh.
Lillian Roth was 45 when this film was made. Here are some other artists that are 45 in 2022.
Oh God.
Shakira, Kanye West, Fiona Apple. Which of these three artists would you most want to see a biopic of?
Fiona Apple, but only if Paul Thomas Anderson directs it.
Wow. You were like right there with that answer.
I mean, they had a
Like
relationship.
you've thought of it before. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I actually do agree that Fiona Apple would probably be the most interesting of those three because there is a lot of material there.
Oh, yeah.
She has lived a life and really, carved her own path.
Mhm.
Not that the others haven't, but she would be a very fascinating subject. But I imagine she would not approve of it, so it probably wouldn't see the light of day.
Yeah. I think like with Shakira, it's just like, who are you going to get to play
I know.
her?
That's impossible.
Impossible. Yeah.
Kanye West, I don't even know. I don't want to touch that.
And I genuinely wonder if any actor in Hollywood would want to touch that with 100-foot pole.
Yeah. Let's move on to Eric Maxwell Bruns. Did the Academy not want to nominate Jane Wyman for another Douglas Sirk film? Would you have nominated Jane for All That Heaven Allows?
Thank you. I was really like looking at this when I finished Love's a Many-Splendored Thing. I went back to my letterbox. It's like, what else? I must have seen something else from this year that could have taken Jennifer Jones's spot and its spot for Best Picture, and All That Heaven Allows was like right there. And I'm like, even if you don't like the movie, come on, Jane Wyman in that is so good. Oh,
it's my favorite performance of hers that I've seen, at least. So yes, I would nominate her. As for whether, the Academy didn't want to nominate her again after Magnificent Obsession, I don't think that's really stopped them before.
No,
from doing things like that. Yeah. So I don't know. They just had a weird relationship with Douglas Sirk in general because of the types of movies he made, is my argument. Mm-hmm. And our friend Matthew St. Clair asked the very same question, which is, would you have nominated her? And yes, absolutely deserved a spot over half of these people. So,
yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's finish off with Andrew Carden, who said, would you have nominated Rosalind Russell for Picnic? Have you seen Picnic?
Not in a long time. And honestly, the only thing I remember from Picnic, other than
William Holden, without a shirt,
it is Kim Novak dancing.
Yes,
that is really
was that.
Yeah, that's really what I remember from that movie. But it's been over a decade since I've seen Picnic, so I can't really say.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing with this, obviously, some people know this about Rosalind Russell in Picnic. She is not the lead actress, even, let alone lead of anything, in that film. And yet, she insisted on being campaigned in lead because she is a leading lady star.
And look, we stan Ms. Russell. She should have had, to my mind, she should have won 2 Oscars. And just that never happened.
Nope.
But girl.
She had her pride. And ironically, I do think if she was in supporting, she would have won.
Yeah, she certainly would have at least gotten nominated, probably.
Yeah, but she didn't have the material necessarily to be in lead, and therefore did not get the nomination. Having said that, I would not nominate her if she was actually campaigning in lead, but I would definitely, again, probably give her the win in supporting. So, there you go. All right, let's move on to our final segment here. Let's give our verdict on who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. We talked about how Susan Hayward was definitely campaigned more than others, but do we think that she actually was the runner-up at the end of the day? What do you think, Dan?
I do think that she was the runner-up. I think they were clearly just not looking to award Katharine Hepburn again yet. They were getting there, but and Summertime did not actually get I don't think it got any other Oscar nominations.
It was nominated for director. Actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right, because David Lean, yes, he did get
a very rare director-actress combo.
Very
I don't think
rare.
we've ever seen that again.
Very rare. And I'll Cry Tomorrow had, I think, a couple others still. It had art direction and costumes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that, they loved that movie more. She had the Cannes imprimatur, plus she's playing an actress. They always love that.
Yeah.
And the drunk acting, fabulous. I do think that if they were going for something operatic for the winner, there was probably an operatic runner-up too.
There you go. Yeah, I think that was Susan all the way was the runner-up there. I feel bad for Eleanor Parker because I was reading an Inside Oscar that the studio just gave her really nothing,
right?
In terms of a campaign,
because it was the same,
totally favored Susan.
Yeah, same studio, and they just said sorry.
Which feels like such a Eleanor Parker thing to happen.
Yeah.
Like she's always the bridesmaid. Someone else always has the glory. Yeah. And then I think, I highly doubt they would have touched Jennifer Jones again.
Although, God, they loved that movie.
They did give it 3 Oscars.
The only Best Picture nominee of this bunch. No, the Rose Tattoo Kid did also get nominated. I forgot.
Yes.
So not the only.
It was the only other one.
Yeah,
here. Right.
Besides the winner.
So, our final question: who would you have voted for from this lineup? Dan Bayer.
I hate this question for this category because, as I explained earlier, I have this very special connection to Katharine Hepburn in Summertime. But at the same time, she already has one. Yeah. And I don't begrudge Anna Magnani's win at all. But I think that in terms of the things that I like and the things that I responded to of these nominees, I do think that it would be very close for me between Hepburn and Hayward. And I do think in the end I probably would have justified voting for Hepburn.
Very good. Wow. That was quite a struggle. I can feel you sweating through the Skype.
It's really I have such a close bond with Jane Hudson in Summertime that it's very hard for me to not say, give it all the awards. And Susan Hayward is really, I think, incredible, and I'll Cry Tomorrow, and she's clearly deserving of an Oscar but hadn't won yet. But there's that connection that I have to Summertime that I just can't get past. I'm sorry.
Well, guess what? I agree with you.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
I would have also voted for Katharine Hepburn here. For me, in my own personal beautiful mind of revisionist Best Actress wins, she is a 2-time winner. The first time I gave her it for Alice Adams. So that would have been my first, and this would have been my second. We'll see if I give her a third or fourth or fifth. Many nominations down the line to talk about, but I think this is a beautiful, beautiful performance. And for me, it's she has all these different iconic moments. She does have the Philadelphia story. She has, Lion in Winter, to a certain extent, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner has a certain special place in people's hearts. On Golden Pond, of course, their other win. But for me, it's like summertime. Something kind of magical happened here.
Absolutely.
And I think there's something that's always drawn me to this performance from her in particular, this performance, that 100% would have voted for her. But would have been very happy clapping in the audience with Anna Magnani winning. No no troubles with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's great. Yeah. I don't begrudge her the win at all. Very deserving.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. This was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you for having me.
Yes. It was very fun talking acting with you. We'll probably talk down the line too about a future race that you're passionate about.
I sure hope so.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll talk offline. Where can people find more of you on the internet?
Sure. You can find my writing at Next Best Picture and at Awards Watch. And you can find me on Twitter at Dancing Dan on Film.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. The show's at Oscar Runner Up. Instagram at And the Runner Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, go to patreon.com/And the Runner Up is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes, including a few with our friend Dan here. So in 2 weeks, we'll be covering the 1956 Best Actress race. The nominees were Carol Baker for Baby Doll, Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia, Katharine Hepburn for The Rainmaker, Nancy Kelly for The Bad Seed, and Deborah Carr for The King and I. What a group, with the winner being Ingrid Bergman. So that's what to watch before the next episode. Thanks so much again, Dan.
Thank you, Kevin.
And with that, I will bid you all adieu.